Do you know that I'm possibly the oldest rugby fan with his own YouTube channel on the internet? I'm not sure whether I'm happy or sad about that one, but my wife was telling me that could be the case yesterday. Oh well, let's get on with it. Inside Rugby with Mark here, folks, and in this series of videos I'm going to be talking about round 3 of this year's Rugby Championship, which is just over a week away, and I'm going to be talking about in each video or each episode, I'm going to be talking about how one team can beat the other team. And in this video, I'm going to talk about how the Springboks might be able to beat the All Blacks next weekend at Eden Park. So let's get into it right now. Yes, I might be getting on in years, but if you want me to talk about rugby in the 1960s and the 1970s, I can do that. And a lot of these other young guys on YouTube are not able to talk about those games. I don't know whether that's in my favour or not, or anybody cares about games back in that era. But I tell you what, that's when men were men and rugby players were rugby players. There were some fantastic games and some fantastic eras of rugby, but I do digress and I want to get into today's video, so let's get on with it. Eden Park in 8 days time. Can you just imagine what it's going to be like for those 23 players from each team who run out in front of that full stadium next weekend at Eden Park and take in that atmosphere and feel that pressure and the nerves and the stress and understanding the game plan and all of that, and then having to try and execute it, taking into account the weather conditions. It could be anything in Auckland. It could be pouring down with rain. It could be a beautiful night with the stars out. You never know what you're going to get. Or it could be a windy hailstorm. Anything is possible, and that could all be through different stages of the game as well. So we've got to take that into account. But look, I'm going to just take it from this point of view that the Springboks are going to come out probably more hyped up than ever to try and take this record away from the All Blacks at Eden Park next weekend. And they're going to have to execute a very significant game plan, I think, if they're going to be successful in doing that. And there's a number of things that we need to take into consideration. And the first thing is the All Blacks are scoring an average of over 30 points a game at the moment this year, even though they're playing badly. So that's something to bear in mind. They're going to have to keep the All Blacks from scoring too many points. And if you look back at South Africa versus the All Blacks over the last number of games, they've been able to do that. The Springboks defence has been something that's been extremely significantly impacting the games against the All Blacks, and I truly believe that that's going to be one of the big telling factors in this game next weekend. So the Springboks rush defence needs to be accurate rather than just fast. So they've got to make sure that they stop Beauden Barrett if he's going to be the playmaker at 10, which I suspect he will be. They're going to have to make sure they stop him from having too much time to make any kind of decisions, whether it be run at the line or whether it be a strategic kicking option, which we, let's face it, haven't seen too much of good strategic kicking from Beauden Barrett lately. So I think the defensive attitude, I'm going to call it, that the Springboks bring to this game is going to be very significant, and how long and how consistent they're going to be with that defense. So put that down as one of the key aspects of what I think could win this game for the Springboks next weekend. Now, the next thing that's on my radar is going to be the impact of Handré Pollard, who I suspect will start this game against the All Blacks. And his strategic kicking is going to be very, very important to the Springboks in terms of the outcome of this game. So we've got the high ball, of course, which we've seen the All Blacks fairly mediocre under in the competition so far. We've got the strategic kicking for touch and getting distance and territory for the Springboks to set up those offensive line-out opportunities. We've seen the penalty kicks for goal. Those need to be a very high percentage. If this game is going to be close, there's going to be a few points in it, then I think Handré Pollard, whoever is the goal kicker for the Springboks, if it's Pollard, then I think that needs to be very accurate, because there could be 2 or 3 points in it that could make the difference. And general kicking in play, making sure that they are competitive. I'm not just talking about the high ball. I suspect we might see, if Damien Deolandi's in this team, we might see some of those little grubber kicks in behind the All Black defensive line. Those can be very impactful against the All Blacks. And we've seen against Argentina that if Sivu Reece, Rico Ioane and Will Jordan are the back three for the All Blacks, they can be quite vulnerable when they're going backwards. So I would say that that could be an area that the Springboks will focus on as well. and give them a good chance in terms of leading them to a win in this particular game. Now, there's going to be a lot of Springbok supporters at the ground on Saturday night. I'm absolutely sure of that. But the Springboks want to take the crowd out of it as much as possible. If you go back to 2023 when they played that game at Mount Smart Stadium in Auckland, the All Blacks got off to a flyer start in that game and they were running away with it by half time. And the crowd were really in that game, and you could just see the All Blacks were getting on a train of emotion and adrenaline. That's the last thing the Boks want to happen in this game. So I think it's going to be important for the Boks to score early and a number of times to keep the crowd quieter in this game, to keep them less of an element of impacting the All Blacks' emotional state, and to make sure that they keep the balance at an equilibrium throughout the game. And we saw in that game at Mount Smart Stadium too, the opposite thing happened when the Springboks started coming back in that game. And if that game was perhaps another 10 minutes longer, they might have snatched it in the end. But when they started getting back into it, of course, the crowd went quiet, and that plays in favour of the Springboks. So I think the crowd and the way that that's managed and what the Boks do in terms of scoring is going to be very, very important. The next thing I'll talk about is when they score. I think that's going to be critical. Staying in touch with the All Blacks is very, very important, particularly if they get off to a really fast start. So we've seen the All Blacks in some games get out to 20 points within 20 minutes of the game or 30 minutes of the game. Definitely 20 odd points by half time. And that puts pressure on the team to come back in the second half. So the Springboks are going to want to make sure the elastic band on the scoreboard doesn't get too far out, and the All Blacks don't get too far in the lead to give themselves too much to do on the way home if that's the way it's going to play out during the game. So scoreboard pressure is going to be key, and that's where I think penalty kicks and keeping the scoreboard ticking over are going to be just as important as trying to score tries and getting multiple phases on the All Blacks. The South Africans are going to have to score tries in this game, whether they do it through their rolling mauls and using their forwards effectively with the likes of Marks and Etzebeth and Quagga Smith, Marco van Staden. Those are some of the players I see that can make that impact and score those tries through the forwards. And then if Grant Williams is playing, to make sure that he has an opportunity to do those sniping runs. He's done that before against the All Blacks, and he's very dangerous when the South Africans get into the All Blacks red zone. So when the Boks are in the All Blacks red zone, I see that they're going to have to score points every time they're down there to really keep the pressure on the scoreboard, but also to keep the gap between the scores as narrow as possible, if not maintaining a lead in the game. Now the Boks are going to have to be very good in defence in their own half, and we saw against Australia they had some problems and they looked vulnerable. As soon as the Wallabies started playing that spontaneous, expansive game, we saw the holes that are in the South African defence, particularly out wide. And there's no doubt the All Blacks will be trying to exploit that at every opportunity. So the Boks wide defence has to be really good. There has to be very good communication between the back three and making sure they understand what their roles are, because I can see the All Blacks putting in some grubber kicks of their own, some high balls of their own, and the Boks are going to have to diffuse that and return those balls with interest. And I think counter-attacking might be the way to go, although I do see this being quite a strategic kicking game. And I think when balls go down into the Springboks half, we're going to see those balls quickly pump back into the All Blacks half to keep territory and possession as much as they possibly can, and to put pressure on the All Blacks coming out of their own half. I think that's something that South Africa has to do well in this game. Now, of course, the simple things like lineouts and scrums, they need to be executed as best as South Africa possibly can in this game. I would suspect we're going to see Etzebeth and Norkia in this game, or Diaga, and we're going to have to see good lineout balls given to those guys from Malcolm Marks. Also some variations in the lineout. That usually works quite well against the All Blacks, but I do expect the All Blacks to have Tupou Vai in this game, and that's going to give them another lineout option. So the lineouts for the Boks are going to be really important to make sure that they get their calls right and they get that consistency from their lineout wins. I'd also like to see them compete against the All Black lineout, give no free ball away to the All Blacks in this game. So they need to make sure they've got men going up and competing in the lineout so the All Blacks are not getting cheap ball. In the scrums, they're going to have to try and be dominant, although I am liking this All Black pack a lot. They didn't perform so well in Argentina as we saw in that second game, but I'm sure they're going to be back with a vengeance in this game. And as a result of that, I think the forward battle up front is going to be very, very interesting. So that front row of perhaps Oxenchair, Malcolm Marks and Wilco Lowe are going to really have to do the work against the All Black front row and make sure they secure the platform. It doesn't need to be a massively dominant scrum from the box. All they need to do is to be able to control it and clear the ball cleanly. So Grant Williams and if Andre Pollard's the number 10, for them to be being able to use the ball that's set up nice and cleanly and not putting them on the back foot straight away from the scrum. So I think that'll need to be their strategy from the scrums. Discipline's going to be huge in this game for the box, so no yellow cards, no red cards, and to minimize the number of penalties in particular, because the All Blacks can be very dangerous. I see the All Blacks trying to play this game at pace if the conditions allow them to do so. And they're going to literally try and run the Springboks off their feet like we saw Australia trying to do. And that's going to be the way that the All Blacks come at the box. So the box need to be awake to this, and they need to make sure that they don't infringe, particularly at the breakdown area. And we saw this against the Wallabies. When they started to see the pressure at the breakdown area, they gave away a number of penalties because of their technical execution around the breakdown. So if we see Peter Steftotoy and Seal Khaleesi, we're going to need to make sure that these guys are absolutely on point with their clearing, as well as Quagga Smith. And I thought he did an exceptionally good job against Australia, even though he was playing number 8 in that particular game. So that's going to be a critical area of the game in terms of penalties. And then silly penalties, we're going to have to watch out for those in both teams, but the box is going to have to be cautious of when they go up and compete for the high ball. And we can expect probably Cheslin Colby to be one of those wingers that's going to be influential in the game in terms of the high ball. We're going to have to make sure that South Africa don't infringe around that particular area of play. So that's going to be something else that they're going to need to watch. Something else I think the box will be watching is different parts of the game according to the time of the game. The first 20 minutes, it's going to be full on from both teams. There's no doubt about it. The All Blacks are going to have that huge motivation in front of their home crowd. They've got this record to defend. They're going to be very pumped up after that performance against Argentina, and they're going to throw everything, including the kitchen sink, the Maori clubs. Everything's going to come at it from the All Blacks in terms of the Springboks. So the Springboks are going to have to keep level-headed during that period of the game. They're going to have to build themselves into the game rather quickly, again, to negate the All Blacks getting out of the gate fast and putting points on them. So they're going to have to be switched on right from the go. They're going to have to hit the field running right from the kickoff. And that's another area that they need to watch out from. They need to make sure they secure the ball from the restarts of play, particularly the start of the game, and make sure they exit from their own territory nice and cleanly and start put the pressure on the All Blacks right away from the beginning of the game. You've got to set the ascendancy as early as you possibly can in the game, and the box can't afford to get behind and start coming at the All Blacks later on, because I don't think they'll be able to run the All Blacks down. So the selection of the bench is going to be another area that's really important, and Russie needs to make sure not only has he got the right players on the bench, but he's reading the game right, and he's bringing those players on at the right time to make the significant impact they need. And we've seen that in the last couple of games, both from the All Blacks and from the South Africans. And I think the Boks are reading the game better and bringing their bench on at a significant point in the game when it really needs it. I think this is something Razor's not doing very well, and I'll talk more about that in the next video when I talk about how do the All Blacks beat the Boks. So I think the way that Russie uses the bench, who he has on the bench, that's going to be another big part of this game as well. And then another area of the game that we don't always talk about as fans or pundits or whatever you want to call people is the 24 hours leading up to this game. I think that's going to be a really critical part of this game. I think the team that's able to get their mind space into the right area and lead into this game with a lot of calmness, understanding the game plan, making sure that everyone knows their responsibility for the game, I think that's the team that's going to come out on top in this game. Because if you take too much adrenaline, too much hype, and you start falling off some of those things mentally, we saw that with the All Blacks in Argentina in that second game. They were terrible from a mindset. So when it came to making some of the decisions on the field in the second half, particularly as the clock was running down, I thought the All Blacks did that very poorly. And sometimes those things start even the day before the game. So the mind has to be really in the right place. So again, Russie and the team need to make sure that 24 hours out from this game, the Springboks players are right in the zone that they need to be. And that doesn't mean it needs to be super hyped up, punching the walls and jumping up and down and running out of the tunnel onto the field like some kamikaze pilot. No, it's about making sure that you understand what your role is within this team against this opposition. And I think that's going to be a really significant part of this game next weekend. Okay, so there are my thoughts around how I think the Springboks can beat the All Blacks at Eden Park next weekend. Most of those areas, they're all intuitive with each other. They all play a role in what happens on the field and off the field, of course. And I think if the Boks are able to do those things really well, and as we always hear from coaches, it's doing the little things consistently well. I think if they're able to do those things, pull those things off, then they'll have a really good chance of beating the All Blacks at Eden Park next weekend. But you have to score a lot of points. You need to defend very, very well. And your kicking game, as far as scoring points with penalties, conversions, and strategic kicking, needs to be right on point. Those are the really, really big ones. And let's see how well the Boks can do that. So let me know in the comments, do you think I've hit some of the things on the head? Do you think I've missed anything that you think the Springboks really need to focus on before, during the game? Let me know in the comments, as I know you will. And I'll be back again really soon with another video. In the next one, I'll talk about how I think the All Blacks can beat the Springboks next weekend at Eden Park. Until then, if you haven't already joined us on the channel by subscribing, my name is Mark. This is Inside Rugby with Mark. I'm a Kiwi rugby fan living here in beautiful Cancun in Mexico, and I'd love you to come along the journey on this channel to join an amazing global rugby community we're bringing together to talk about our great game, share our thoughts and opinions, but most of all, respect each other about our opinions on what we think about the game of rugby. I'll see you all again soon in the next video. Until then, it's adios from me. Keep well, keep safe, and keep enjoying your rugby. Bye for now.